David Kilgore, welcome to the Victory Degree Podcast.
Man, thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure.
So, David, in doing research about your journey and who you are, I guess for those who don't know, let's start off with the basics. You're an ultra runner, you are an endurance athlete for Red Bull. But the path to getting to where you are today wasn't a straight shot. And so you've had many twists and turns, no pun intended, along the way. And so I'm curious, as we start this podcast, can you tell me what dominoes you think had to fall just the right way for you to be where you are today?
Man, honestly, a lot of them had to fall the right way, and it's really fun to look back and to kind of like think about the full process of how you ended up into the spot you are in life. And I mean, just from the beginning, I mean, it was kind of a fluke that I got into running. I feel like I definitely owe a lot of that to my dad as well. He basically made a decision to start going to the gym quite a bit, and he's like, I want to put on some muscle, I want to get swell up, like let's go. And as he did, he's a little bit of a shorter guy. He just kind of like blew up pretty quick, put on a lot of muscle, and he's like, I want to trim down. And so when he was doing that, he started running a little bit, and I was just like a little kid. And whenever I would come in and visit my dad, I would, I'd watch him go out and do this, and I was like, wow, that just like looks like a bunch of fun. And I kept asking him to kind of like join in with that, and that was like the first time that I really got into the running space is through that. And kind of like right off the bat, it was something that just like ignited my spirit as a kid. I was like, wow, this is just so exciting. I can't wait to get outside again, and I can't wait to keep doing this. So I feel like that was the first thing. And again, there was no history, I feel like, in my family of people distance running or anything along those lines. And then I feel like the main piece that kind of like really, I guess, like fully like put me into this space was, again, I was whenever I'd go visit my dad, he was still going to the gym, and I was starting to run more and more. And I was on a treadmill one day, and I was also just like, again, a young kid, just like having fun. So I'd bounce from machine to machine, like max them out, like have a blast, as you do, and hanging from the rafters. And this woman came up to me when I was going pretty quick on a treadmill, and she's like, "Oh, like, you look pretty good doing this." And um, and luckily at that time, she was able to introduce me into my who is soon to be my high school running coach, who's actually the most winningest coach in Florida State history for distance running. His name's Doug Butler, and I feel like that not only put me in such a great place in my life, but also just the way Coach Butler fostered running for me really just kind of like sprungboard, I feel like, my love for it and also my tenacity for the sport.
Do you think if that lady hadn't gone up to you in the gym that one day, you would be living some drastically different life? Or do you think that running was always something that was inevitable and you're always going to do what you're doing today? It's just you took a certain path to get there.
Yeah, I honestly think it's a really strong question. I mean, it's yeah, really hard to say. I mean, honestly, I feel like one side of things, I definitely feel like um I was so excited about the sport right off the bat, and I was able to be in that community pretty quickly, and that's what was kind of like making me excited about it too, on top of like being really competitive. But I really do think things would have been quite a bit differently in my life, because again, I think I do attribute, again, I mean, I think I was like very intrinsically motivated, and I mean clearly still am. But I think the environment that I got placed into, because I was introduced to the right people, the right community, and really fostered running to be a really fun environment. I mean, because I mean, I'm sure a lot of people know. I mean, running isn't always, I feel like, the most fun sport, and especially I feel like first getting into it, man, it is a grind in a lot of ways. So it's I think I owe a lot to actually that first meetup.
You talked about Doug Butler, who was instrumental in your journey. What were some of the things that he taught you, or maybe changed your mindset on about running?
He was definitely a very like hardcore coach, especially for young athletes. But that's something that really resonated with me. I mean, I really always enjoyed working hard and kind of like getting after it. So I feel like that resonated really strongly with me. And at the time, I didn't realize other layers of things that he was incorporating when I was at a younger age. And then kind of when I reflected back and I was doing a little bit more training later on in my life, more solo and kind of more at a different degree, I was able to reflect a lot on kind of like what made me enjoy running so much so quickly and at that stage in my life. And again, I really believe it's the community that Doug Butler has fostered in that area. He has made uh, he's made kids across the board excited. He's there day in and day out. He runs with the kids himself. So I feel like he definitely like leads by example. But also again, he incorporates um, I feel like fun aspects into the training. Like he did things like running the milk mile, uh, like doing like pasta dinners and all of those things. And I definitely feel like Doug Butler was like almost like a second father to me. Just how much he cares about everybody, and I think that just matters so much. And again, I think that matters in has reflected in the community is fostered, and it's it's been so incredible for me to I guess like I experienced that at a young age, so it automatically gave me such a core group of people that were in my corner.
What's the milk mile?
So it's very similar to it's exactly the same thing as a beer mile, but
Okay.
with milk. So basically, the concept of it is you start off the mile, you sling a cup of milk, run 400 meters, and every 400 meters you have to drink an 8 ounce glass of milk to do it. But instead of beer, of course, so it's more kid friendly. We do milk, and again, I feel like infusing those things at like a really young age, but kind of definitely layered with a very structured training plan. It was so exciting, and it's still probably one of the most exciting running times in my life that I enjoyed the most.
Let me ask you a question because it's something that I can't, for the life of me, get out of my head since hearing about it. So I don't know if you're familiar with Scott Galloway or any of his work.
I'm not super familiar now.
So essentially, entrepreneur. He now has a podcast. He's big in media, but I really resonate with a lot of the things that he says. Recently, read his book Algebra for Happiness, which I highly recommend. It's a short read; you can get through it probably in a couple of days. But he talks about how basically young adults are being lied to when others tell them, "Hey, follow your passion." And his argument is that you don't really follow your passion, you follow things that you're good at. And passion comes as a result of being good at that one thing. And so if we take running, for example, maybe you're not really into running to begin with, but you're really good at it. And people tell you, hey, David, you're really good at running. And then you start, setting records or you start, doing really well. And all of a sudden, this passion comes out as a result of you being good at that one thing and just gaining recognition from others. And so I'm curious, as you look back through your own journey, it sounds like you had a love for running maybe from the start, but which side of the argument would you take?
I think I would take Scott's side of the argument, actually. I think more of my passion um, came out, like I discovered more of my passion along the way, but I think it was through the lens of being good at something or being interested in something. Um, when I first started running, I mean, I just like love the competitive spirit of it. I loved it right away. I feel like I'm a very physical person, and I enjoy the physicality of the sport. And then when something that didn't realize that I loved so much at a young age, that again, when I reflected back on it, I realized that that's why I love the sport so much, was the people that are in the running community and the intimate time you get to spend with one another. And so I think at the end of the day, my the root of like what I loved about the sport so much is I definitely like layered in like wanting to be competitive, wanting to push myself to new limits and challenge myself. But what I actually loved was spending this intimate time with people. And it's still really what I love so much about the sport. I feel like it's kind of like running it. I feel like as I've grown older too, it's like the red thread through so many different melt it's like a melting pot, of people from all over the world that are using running in some type of different form. And it's incredible, honestly, to kind of like experience that and do a physical movement, honestly. Yeah. And also it's running to me, I haven't experienced anything really kind of like to this day and age where you can be so intimate and raw with somebody. Because honestly, everything's kind of away. Phones are away. You're kind of stripped down to like what you have, and you're just like there with that other person, and you're connecting whether you're talking or not. Um, but as you could imagine too, I mean, you're there for hours on end running with somebody else. I mean, everybody kind of like spills their guts about like everything that's going on in their life, which is really cool too.
You talk about this competitiveness and desire to push yourself to the limits. We'll get into it later on in this podcast, but you have done some pretty remarkable things. And you've done things that many would probably consider abnormal, at least for maybe the ordinary man or woman. Where does this competitiveness come from and this desire to push yourself to the limit? And why do you think so many people struggle to get to where you are?
I mean, for personally for myself, I kind of had it since a young age, and honestly, I don't know where I guess it came from as much. I remember one of the first times. I mean, I feel like it's like a classic story, but when I was in kindergarten, I was like 5 years old, and I remember just like not being good at something in my like gym class or whatever you want to call it when you're in kindergarten. And I got just like I had to like I didn't get picked or I had to sit out or something. And from that moment, I just got like I feel like I just had like a flame inside of me. I got so infuriated that I was like, I gotta do everything in my power. I don't want this to happen to me again. Um, and I don't know. I remember feeling that passion to want to be good at something, to want to push myself to become something better. Um, and I feel like I've always had that. And I think it's just, I guess for myself, it's more of a curiosity. Once I kind of do something, I'm like, okay, like that was incredible. What's the next thing? How can I like feel this again? How can I push myself to something that I didn't think was possible? Like when I first started doing ultra running, I remember one of the things that I ended up doing later on was this race from LA to Vegas, which is around 340 miles. But the first ultra race I did was around 50K, and I did that, and I did fairly well. But I was hurting, man. I was destroyed after the race, and I remember someone approaching me after that, like months later, and they're like, "Hey, like you're doing ultras now. That's like sick. You kind of like are in this like unsanctioned realm too of like racing. Would you ever be into doing this race from LA to Vegas?" And I was like, "Man, there's no way anybody's ever getting me to do that." So I feel like it's definitely been a small build, or like a steady build over the years of kind of like the challenges that I've been doing. But I think it's just like constantly new curiosity of once I like accomplish one thing, what's the next, what's the next, and what's the next. And it just keeps running really interesting and really fun for me. And I mean, what I think I feel like over the years, so like when I did my first ultra race, it was a 50K event, and I remember somebody telling me about this race from LA to Vegas, it's a 340-mile race, and I was like, "There's no way I'm ever going to do that," because I was so disheveled from the 50K race. But I think it's one of those things that again with like curiosity that it was building over the years and has gotten me to the place that I am now, where I'm like, okay, I did the 50K. What can I go a little bit further? I think that's like possible. And then as it kind of like kept growing and growing and growing, I then like was able to go after these like really large feats that I never thought were possible. And again, it's like it makes me so exciting, just like excited thinking about this. Just because again, it's just like I remember where I was like a handful of years ago, and I'm like, wow, I can't fathom like what the human body is like constantly capable of, and that I was able to go do that. I mean, even going for some of the runs that I go on a daily basis, it's I don't know, it's pretty wild to think about. I mean, like a 10-mile run, I feel like for a distance runner, it's like a kind of like a common thing. But if you run like 10 miles and then get in the car and then you start driving and you're like, this is insane. Like, I can't believe my body just like carried me over this distance. This is like really far. Like, this is nuts, you know? It's really cool.
So this podcast comes at a perfect time because I just finished reading David Goggins' book "Can't Hurt Me."
Yeah.
And I'm sure you're familiar with David and his story,
Hmm.
but he had a quote in there, and it's sort of kind of a rule as well that I wanted to ask you. He calls it the 40% rule. And I'm quoting from his book, but he says, "We normally give only 40%. Learn how to unlock the remaining 60%. Remove the governor from your brain." And so I'm curious how you went about unlocking that other 60%.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I again, I think it's doing something that's out of your comfort zone, but you still feel is obtainable at the time. And I think that's what I've been doing over the years, in my build to get to where I'm at. Because like again, if somebody told me they're like, "Hey, you're gonna be able to run like from LA to Vegas," I would be like, "Dude, there's not a chance." Like I just ran 30 miles and I feel like I'm gonna die, you know? So I honestly think it's setting obtainable goals because I fully believe with what David said. I mean, what the human body is actually like capable of, it's completely outstanding. I mean, it's insane. And I think do like putting my body through a lot of this over the years too. It's I guess put my bar at a different level of what I think like everybody is capable of. And I'm sure David feels the same way. Where it's like I'm like, oh, like you can like almost like no matter who you are, you can go out and run a marathon like tomorrow. I mean, it's gonna be probably torturous to a lot of people, but you can go and do it. And you can get through it and it's gonna happen. But I think it's unlocking that next piece in your mind to be able to do it. And once you get going, I really do think it's addicting and you just like you want to keep like elevating and keep pushing your body. Uh a person that I know, Jesse Itzler, actually, I like his methodology of something that he does every year, and I think he's been doing it for like the last 20 years of his life. But very successful, like businessman. He basically picks at least a one time per year where he just does something like outrageous, like in the endurance field, and he's like, I use it for like a complete reset of my body, and I just think it again, like kind of like talking about unlocking something. He's like, I just think it like kind of like puts me back at like where my body should be and unlocks something new in my mind. And I actually just like love that concept because yeah, when you're out there again, it's just doing something that's so absurdly like crazy, I guess, in the endurance realm. It just fully like breaks you down in a different way with your body, your mind. And I feel like it's special in a lot of ways because you just really want the essential things in life. You want a buddy to like talk to, you want like a person to like to be there with you. You want just food, you want water. And it's a really, really cool like place to be in.
Yeah, I love Jesse. I've been listening to a lot of his stuff. Have heard him on multiple podcasts. He has like that big calendar too. I think that he sells that is also just outrageous. I
Yeah.
think most of the things that Jesse does is just like outrageous, like on a much
Right.
larger
Yeah.
scale than like most
Without a doubt.
people. Yeah. I'm curious though, because okay, so I'll be honest with you. I am more of a swimmer. I grew up
Mhm.
playing water polo. I still swim, just for recreationally, just to stay in shape. But there's always those times when I'm swimming where there's like that little voice inside my head that says, "All right, let's just stop here. Like, we've done 8 laps. This has been good. You're starting to hurt a little. Let's just take a break and maybe pick this back up in like 30 seconds." So, what for you? I'm sure you've had similar thoughts when you're doing these crazy runs. How do you suffocate that little voice, or are there certain things that you're telling yourself while you're running that help push you to go farther?
Yeah, it's definitely kind of I guess like a mixture of things. I feel like setting out on a goal like beforehand, and you kind of like get into those like low points and into those zones. I feel like just like reflecting with yourself to be like, you know what, I signed up for this. Like I'm ready for this. I chose to be here, and I want to be here. And I think just like having those like self reflections like during it like helps get me through the low points of some of these races. But also I feel like I kind of like during the duration of these like really long things, I think about a little bit of everything, honestly. And something that I feel like helps me get through everything the most is just people, man. Honestly, people. I love running with people so much, and I get my energy from people. And so even like some races that don't allow as many pacers, I'm definitely not as like forward to go to those races just because I'm like I want to be with somebody out there. After a handful of hours, you know, it's definitely nice to be secluded and with your own thoughts and your own mind and to push yourself in that way sometimes. But for the most part, I just love the camaraderie of the sport and with my crew and team.
I want to take you back to freshman year of college when you were at the University of Colorado. So you go to high school at Holy Trinity. You then go to the University of Colorado, and then you end up at the University of Florida, where you finish out your bachelor's degree, and then you go to Oklahoma State for your master's. But if I take you back to your freshman year in college, you were interviewed, and you said that your advice to high school athletes, and I quote, is be yourself, be confident, and be patient. You have to progress at your own rate, even if you want to be the best guy right from the start. Hearing that quote, and obviously looking back on everything that you've experienced, does that quote still hold true? Like, what would you tell your high school self today?
Man, I actually can't believe I said that at
Yeah.
that age. Yeah, I would honestly say, man, yeah, that it holds true. To what I actually believe. I mean, I think that's what I found out really fast. Again, when I hit college, I mean, such a different atmosphere, which was great in a lot of ways. I mean, it just became. I was definitely really good at running in high school and had a lot of opportunity, and but there was such a mixture again of like this like fun loving. I was also a very like adventurous guy. I was doing a lot of like different things when I was also training really really hard. When I went to college, it definitely felt like more of a business right away. Um, and again, that's kind of like, you know, they're setting you up for that. I mean, the college that I went to is a very high caliber place, um, and basically, yeah, they're setting you up to become a professional runner. So it makes sense the team is kind of like functioning in that capacity. But it was something that wasn't resonating with me as much. So I definitely like stand true to that. Just to be like, hey, be yourself, be patient, set your own goals, and kind of like get after the things that you know that are setting your soul on fire.
Speaking of patience, if I were to say, David, I want to become an endurance athlete, and specifically, I want to get into ultra running. Like I previously mentioned, I'm more of a swimmer, so my running stamina is probably near zero. What would what would your training plan look like for me, and how many years are we talking about? Let's say we start tomorrow, and I want to be close to where you are today. What does that training plan look like, and how many years of work would it actually take?
Yeah, I mean, you would especially if you didn't have too much of a running background. We definitely have to start slow. I mean, I think a solid year to kind of like build up. If we were doing a long-term build to something quite grand in distance, I would say like at least probably a year to get some really solid like base mileage and to kind of like get your body adapted to more of the intensity and the pounding and the volume of the mileage. And then I would say probably the second year, kind of like more fine tuning that. And then I would say maybe around like year three, would really go for something big. I mean, that's not the exact plan that you could definitely get there quicker. It's just going to hurt a lot more. But that's what I would probably recommend.
And how many miles a week are we talking?
I mean, I would probably start you off with, I mean, probably towards the back end of like 25 miles per week at the very beginning of the plan and building up towards in the first year, probably 100 to 120 miles a week to give you just like a strong base. And then in the second year, I would probably bring it back down towards like, the 80 to 100 miles a week and just like build on a lot more intensity with like speed and workouts and stuff.
100 miles a week. Is that what you typically run now? I mean, what does your training plan look like nowadays?
Yeah, so I mean, I probably actually I'm on the lower side of mileage, I think, for a lot of people that do what I do. But I range probably from 60 to 90 miles a week on average. Um, and again, I think that's just because I mean I've been running now, which it's honestly like crazy to think about it in my mind for about 22 years. So my base mileage is so extensive that I don't feel like I need as much regular like mileage on me. And I focus a lot more on high intensity, like type of like repetitions and things along those lines.
Do you typically do workouts like outside of running? Like, do you do any sort of like strength training, anything along those lines?
I do I mess around with like other sports sometimes, but I feel like some light strength training, and I've actually been incorporating a lot more into my training over the last couple years, and I think it's paid like great dividends.
Yeah. I wanted to actually go back. So you mentioned when you went to the University of Colorado. By the way, Sco Buffs, my sister just graduated from there. Great university. um, Beautiful too, especially in the winter. When you went there, was that sort of like a tipping point for you in terms of, okay, now it's time to actually take running a little more seriously than maybe you were before? I mean, obviously in high school you mentioned that you were training and you had a fantastic coach, but was there ever like a tipping point or a moment where you said, all right, let's actually go and try to do incredible things here?
Yeah, I honestly think that's kind of where it was. I mean, it was the first time it kind of um I would say hit me in the face in that way. Just because I feel like for the longest time it was just something that I kind of like looked into, that I was like really loving and having a ton of fun with. And of course there was a ton of work that I did in high school and yeah, a lot of hard work with my team. But that was the first time that I feel like I was in this completely like professional environment with um any resources that I needed as an athlete. And I was like, okay, like, and also surrounded by other just like world class like athletes. I mean, a lot of athletes from that school become Olympians and are just such high caliber. And I feel like it was that first time that yeah, I really realized I was like, wow, like, all right, it's time to kind of like buckle down and really get after this sport. So I'm even able to keep up with this team.
Yeah. Think you mentioned in a different podcast that after college, I think after graduating UF, you had a bit of a low point with running where you didn't even know if you wanted to continue running. And I think after college, you tried a couple of different things. I think you're a photographer, just taking cool pictures on your iPhone. And then I think you were a substitute teacher maybe at one point. So, I mean, you were kind of, you were exploring everything. I think, you also took 6 months off and kind of just camped out and explored, the great outdoors, kind of just doing your own thing. But then that kind of got, maybe too repetitive or you kind of wanted something more. So take me back to that time and what your mindset was and why you decided to pick running up again.
Yeah, so I mean, definitely shouts to my now wife that I met along the way and kind of brought me back into everything. Um, but during that time, yeah, I got out of school. I had a few like personal like roller coaster things happen in my life, um, and yeah, I feel like I've been in this environment that kind of I guess more or less like took the joy out of what I was loving about running so much out of it for a little while. And so I just kind of was like, hey, you know what? I've been doing this for a really long time. I definitely progressed and became a lot faster than I was. And but I was like, I think I just need to, take a little bit of a break and I don't want to work in running. I don't want to run myself really. I kind of like knew, I guess, like in my heart that I was like, I'll probably like come back to this one day and I'll jog around every now and then just because I had already been doing it for so long. And I don't know, I feel like it was like a part of my lifestyle that I was like, I'm probably not going to fully, I guess, like say goodbye to this, but I was like, we'll see. And yeah, basically went on I guess like a little journey, worked a handful of different jobs, kind of like explored around. And then during this journey, I actually met my wife, Molly, and I crashed at her apartment originally, and then ended up like staying there, and it was in New York City. And at the time, we originally had met at a running camp up in New Hampshire, and um and basically she worked at Nike at the time, and she knew that I ran to some capacity, but she didn't know I guess to the full capacity that I ran to. And so every now and then we were still like, she's like, hey, do you want to go for like a 2 mile run or something in the city? And I was like, yeah, sure. So I'd go running with her, and then like 8 months go by or something, and she's like, hey, I have this cool opportunity where we're putting on this mile race. It's now the Brooklyn Mile, which is an awesome race. So if you're ever in New York City, check out the Brooklyn Mile in the summertime. It's pretty sick. And they were making these different teams per borough. So there's 5 boroughs in New York City. So each team had like specialized like Nike singlets and shoes, and it was cool. And she's like, hey, if you can run around like 5 minutes in a mile, we can plug you in. She's like, do you think you can do that? And I was like, yeah, I think I could do that. And she's like, what do you think you can run in a mile? And I told her, I was like, maybe I can run like a 4:40 or something like that. And she's like almost like on the floor, like laughing at me, like in my face. She's like, dude, there's no way you could do that. She's like, not a chance. She's like, that's cool that you think that though, but whatever. I'll try to put you in. If it works out, it works out. And ended up getting in. Went to the race and did the race. And kind of from that moment on, I feel like running became much different, I guess, to me, but really exciting in a new way. It was kind of the first thing. New York is really special in this way that there's everything under the sun that you could imagine here. I mean, that's New York, I guess, in a nutshell, but also in the running community. There's like super elite groups. There's sub elite. There's ultra runners. There's people that are running out of barbershops. There's hospitality workers running at 2 a.m. There's all these different collections of run clubs and crews all over the city, and that was the first introduction that I got introduced to them. And I was like, this is really cool and really exciting. And so it kind of made me get back into running in that capacity where I was starting to just like bounce around to all these different clubs, meeting all these different people, but they're using running as a vehicle for something else. Whether it was just like for community, for to go get drinks, to train hardcore. It was just like a little bit of everybody. And I was like, this is really fun and really exciting, and kind of just like boosted me back into, I guess, my love for the competitive piece of it, and also just the love for the sport overall.
Speaking of community and running for things that are maybe bigger than yourself, you once ran 100 miles in a day to raise money for charity. So can you please explain why you did that, and what the cause was for?
Yeah. So actually, during the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020, um, as everyone's aware, everything kind of got like shut down for a bit of time, and all the events got canceled. So that was actually my first year that I was going to attempt a 100-mile race. And when that happened, I was talking to one of my friends, and I was like, hey, I was like, we should just still just like go out and do this. And he was a photographer, and he was like, yeah, it's awesome. He's like, I would love to like take photos. It could be like a really cool thing. We're in these like really remote spots, out in Florida. And so started setting it up. And as like, I mean, this was just like over like a few days as we were like ideating, I was like, you know what? I was like, everybody's kind of just like hanging out at home right now too. I was like, we should just like FaceTime or like Instagram live a bunch of different people like throughout the day when I'm running, and just like talk to people, like see what they're doing, if they're running somewhere else in the world, if they're doing like a workout class. It'd be really cool. This like just like I feel like full piece where we can interact with like all these different like touch points around the world and see how they're like remotely doing their thing as well. And so that was kind of like the next layer of it. And then I kind of put it out there in the world, and it definitely started getting some traction. So then I was like, oh, actually, like this is also like there's like a great community here. There's like a lot of people looking at this. I was like, how awesome would it be to be able to? Because I've worked in the run industry for a while now, um, and worked with pretty close to a lot of different like run specialty retail shops that I know that were like struggling during that time. And I was like, how sick would this be if we raised a bunch of money for some of these like smaller like run shops around New York City specifically, um, and basically donated the money back to them. And then I feel like the basically just kept evolving and kept evolving and kept evolving to the point where we purchased gift cards from all these different like run specialty retail shops, or footwear from all these run specialty retail shops, and then gifted the footwear to all the frontline hospital workers around New York City as well. So I think honestly to this date that was still might be the one of the best runs I've ever done in my life, man. I mean, it was so incredible. One, I mean, there's so many layers to it. It was a lot of like hometown like trails that I connected this huge path that I ran when I was young that made this like 100-mile route. I was able to connect with all these different people from all over the world, and kind of we were able to, inspire and build energy off of one another throughout the entirety of the 17 hours that I was running. And then also being able to use sport as something more and to be able to give back. I mean, it was one of the coolest projects. And after that, honestly, over the last handful of years, I've done a lot more like philanthropic work with sport just because of that and how meaningful it was to me. And I don't know, it's something that still excites me the most, I think, about running. Again, I love the physical aspect of challenging myself and pushing myself to new limits. But also I love the marketing aspect, and I love being able to be able to give back with like an idea that inspires people to get moving.
My next question is going to be, what month of the year did you do it? Because running in Florida is very different running in January and running in July.
Yeah. Yeah, man, it was honestly pretty toasty. I'm not gonna lie, it's pretty toasty. It was in the beginning of May, I believe. Yeah.
So can you give, I mean, I live in Orlando, so I know how it is, but for people who are maybe not from Florida, can you give them a taste of what it's like running, especially in the summer months?
Oh man, you are swimming outside no matter where you're at. Humidity through the roof. And I think it got it to around like 90 degrees that day outside. So it was definitely not a cool day in the woods. And actually, unfortunately, too, part of the route that I was running, one of the areas that was usually much more shaded, there was actually a controlled fire out there, and so I was just getting scorched alive, man, all day long. So yeah, it was a little hot to say the least.
Yeah, I sometimes play tennis on the weekends, and it's like if you're out there past 9:30, it gets pretty tough. I always tell people, if you want to do anything in Florida in the summer, do it between the hours of like 7 to like 8:30 in the morning, and then after that it just gets unbearable. You're better suited just staying indoors and cranking that AC and struggling through the summer months. But yeah, I mean you go to love it. As you look back on your races, and I still want to ask you about the 7 marathon and 7 continents and 7 days thing that you did. But as you look back through your races, is there something that you can point to that say, hey, running has really changed me in this one way? You talked about, giving back and the power of community, but if there's one thing that you can single out to say, running really changed me in this way.
I think it's getting to the point of just, kind of, I guess, like pure exhaustion where you're completely like broken down as a person. It's I don't know, it's such a freeing feeling. Again, I guess like going back to that race I did from LA to Vegas. I remember I was like telling somebody because I was really busy with work at the time, and I was like, oh, I can't wait to go do this. Like my mind is probably like it's almost like clear. I feel like it's like almost like a vacation. They're like, that's your vacation. Uh, and what I mean by that, I guess, I mean, of course, the effort is like incredibly physical and definitely like destroys your body. But I feel like just how, again, how much it strips you down, it makes everything so meaningful, and it really just um, gives me like such clarity in life. You know, it just like makes, I don't know, everything that you think is like important, it just like gets stripped down. You're like, oh, like these are actually the important things in life. And I feel like it just gives you such a great perspective on how to be, I guess. And also I think it also just gives such great perspective on how to be adaptable in life as well. I mean, as you can imagine, I mean, being out for some of these races, whether it's 10 hours, 20 hours, multiple days, uh it's ever changing. So you can go into this something with a plan. I mean, it's never really going to fully work out. And I think that's what's exciting about it, though, and I think it's super translatable to life, that, everybody has these ideas of like what you want out of life. But I think kind of what life gives you is the really exciting part of it.
Take us. I really want to feel like I was there. I mean, running 340 miles, most of us are probably never going to experience that. And so if we could have been maybe like a fly in your jacket or something, or experience what you're experiencing during those races, or any one of your races for that matter, really take us deep into what are you actually going through? Like, what are you telling yourself? Like, what is it by mile 15? You're like, well, my toe really hurts, or, my calves are burning, or, I really want to experience, as much as I can through this podcast and talking virtually with you, what it was like to run some of these races that you do.
Yeah, honestly, I feel like someone told me this once for a 10K race, uh, as compared to like a 5K race, because when you progress, I guess, in track and field, actually the pace isn't too different than running a 5K to a 10K. So in the 10K, one of my friends told me, they're like, it's like slowly being like compressed to death, I guess. And I feel like I've, I think I haven't felt a race better than that, than some of like 100-mile north type of race. It's just like I haven't experienced too much where, I mean, I'm definitely like, I guess, like a little bit loopy when I'm out there and getting like further in the race, like in my mind. But for the most part, I've always felt pretty coherent in what I'm doing. But it's like your muscles somehow like are slowly just like getting like broken down and broken down and broken down and broken down. And even in your mind, you're like, come on. I don't know why I can't move any faster. I feel okay. Like, it's not like your heart's pumping out of your chest. It's not like your lungs are like bleeding. It's just like your muscles cannot like give any more power because you've put so much on them. And um, I think what the most inspiring part of it is, though, when you're just like, it's like riding the roller coaster of it all. It's like when you're in such a low, it's a really hard time where you're just like, I don't know why I'm doing this. Like, everything is like so painful. It's like I can't get out of this. But I think it all like comes to fruition when uh, you're 300 miles into a race, you're 90 miles into a 100-mile race, and you're able to like move like you just started like a 10-mile run or something, and you're like, how is this possible? You almost get like goosebumps all over your body. And you're like, I'm able to like continue to go and continue to move like this and continue to be this, I don't know, being that's, yeah, being able to, I guess, like withstand this type of like beating to your body. Um, and again, I feel like it all goes back to different moments throughout the whole journey. But what I truly love is just, it's like one of those things when you're like a little kid too, when you're like, you're running around on like a sports field and you're like, oh, I can't wait to just like have that sip of water. I feel like you have that again, and that's like such a cool feeling to have like complete clarity where you're like all I want really right now in the world is just like I want my buddy to like stand there for a second so I can like lean on his shoulder, I want like a sip of water. I want a bite of food, and I feel like that's like I don't know. It's super meaningful to me, and I feel like it's like given me a lot of clarity.
Yeah, I feel like I mean, in hearing you talk and kind of thinking back to my own experience, I almost feel like there's something in there about, starving yourself of basic necessities. And it's almost like a reset for the body because I think in today's day and age, it's so easy to, if you're hungry, it's so easy to get food for most of us, right? Most of us are blessed in the Western world to have access to food, have access to hot water, to basic shelter, to all of these things that can satisfy us instantly. And so I certainly think that there's something in there about starving yourself of those basic necessities. And again, almost it's like a reset for your body. And you're like, oh, that's right. I can't, I can't be successful. I can't run a business. I can't do all these things if I also don't meet all of my basic needs like water, like food. And it's funny because you bring up being a little kid running around the playground. I remember after recess, man, I'll go hard in the basketball courts, and it's like the only thing that I want in the world after recess is that fountain water. That was like the only thing. I remember like there always being a line, all the kids, wanting the water, but it's it's funny. It's funny how that works. And I certainly sometimes feel even when I'm swimming, it's like, man, the only thing I want to do right now is grab a hold of that wall and just take like a 2 second rest. So that's certainly interesting.
No, without a doubt, man. I mean, nothing tastes better than that sip of water, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So speaking of beating up your body and doing crazy things, you did 7 marathons on 7 continents in 7 days. Really quickly, why did you do it, and what did that schedule look like?
Oh man, yeah. That was probably it's probably one of the most fun things I've ever done, and also one of the most challenging. I actually first wanted to do this event a handful of years back. A buddy of mine, Mike Wardian, who's a super decorated ultra athlete, went and did it, and I was just enthralled by the event. And I was like, wow, this is like absolutely insane. I gotta do this one day. And so I feel like again, like it's been ever evolving for me with the challenges that I'm doing, and I feel like that was kind of like the next thing on deck that I had my eyes on. And so when I first got there, you fly into South Africa in Cape Town. You stay there for a few days because you do like some race briefings and everything like that. And you're also that's where you fly out of to go to Antarctica. It's like a straight shot. It's like 5.5 hours, and you start there first because the weather is so volatile and in Antarctica that yeah. So that's the first stage. So we fly out there, and also like the weather was supposed to be sort of nice, or at least that's what the race directors were telling us. uh, and so they're like, oh, it might be one of the best years ever. You might be able to like run in like shorts and a t-shirt. And we get out there, man, and it is like it's crazy. I think it was like 40 or 50 mile an hour wind, and like negative like 32. It's so brutal. But we get out there, and so the weather's getting pretty bad. So the original course was supposed to be around an airfield out at the Novo base in Antarctica. We go into these portables to kind of warm up, get changed, throw on extra clothes if we needed. So like a half an hour later, the race directors come in, and or the race organization, and they're like, hey, we're actually going to wait like half an hour. And basically this goes on for, because of the weather, this basically goes on for about 2 hours. And then they come in, and I feel like almost like out of a movie. They look like frozen to the bones. And they're like, the weather's getting so bad out there. They're like, if we don't get out there now and get this like 8 hour window, they're like, we're gonna be stuck here for like 2 days. So we go and run in this like crazy weather, man, just like blistering wind. But honestly, it was still just, I don't know, such an incredible experience. I mean, I honestly hate the cold. I mean, Florida boy, true and true. Uh, but I was like, every now and then I was like looking around at just completely untouched place. We were running out and backs because the visibility got so low. So we did about 13 out and backs. And as we ran along, the wind was so high that the snow drifts were pushing over, and it just like exposed this blue like glacier ice that was just like out of this world. It was so cool. Um, and then from there, we jumped back into the plane, went over to South Africa, back to Cape Town, did the second marathon there, then off to Perth in Australia, then to Dubai for Asia, and then we went over to Madrid in Spain for Europe, then Fortaleza in northern Brazil, and then ended in Miami, which was honestly super iconic as well, really fun, and so many people's friends, family, loved ones like showed up there, and it was so sick, man. I mean, like a proper crowd, like showing up at like midnight at this like just on South Beach, and there's like a crowd of people waiting to watch us go off and run a marathon. It was a really cool experience.
I think I read online that the only time that you had to rest and recover were the 68 hours that you spent flying in between destinations. Is that true?
Man, spot on. Basically, yeah, because we had to go through like customs, get bag checks, like all the above for the whole process. So yeah, it was basically, and luckily there's usually about an 8 hour window, and I think I averaged for the entirety of the trip about 250 per marathon. So I definitely had a little bit of a leeway. So I had a handful of hours in each place to kind of like have a little bit of downtime. The only place that I really just like went straight back inside was Antarctica. I was like, I'm out. I was like, I spent my time out here. I'm getting out of here.
So then I have to ask you, because it's pretty remarkable. You got better with each race. I mean, to say you got faster, so you improved your time each and every race, but yet seemingly your recovery and rest was not optimal. So how did you manage that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of I feel like that's my bread and butter for the things that I do. I love the multi-stage races, and I feel like I just get more. I don't know. I feel like I get more excited when I run, but also my body recovers quite quickly. And also again, we were able to sleep on the planes. We were alternating between like business class and like economy. But no matter what, you could like lay down, and if I can go horizontal, man, I was like, count me in. It's like sleeping in a bed. So I was able to actually recover quite well, and I was actually just talking to one of my friends. Name's Bex. She's actually doing the event this year, and I'm actually going back and doing it in November, the World Marathon Challenge, and uh and that's what I was like, honestly, I feel like your body kind of adapts to it as well. I mean, definitely like the fourth day in or so, I feel like you're just kind of like sitting into it, and your body's like, oh, like this is what I do now. I guess I wake up, I run a marathon, I get back on this plane and fall asleep, and then I wake up in some new environment and do the same thing. So I feel like it's just, I don't know, it's kind of like a crazy thing to think about too, and I guess I need to do, I guess, more research or something on it in the future, because I'm like super fascinated about like, I guess, like why the human body reacts to certain things the way it does. Because again, I'm not going out and running 100 miles all in spot all the time, but I can run a 100 mile race, and then the second time that I do it in like 8 months, uh, it's like it feels better, it feels easier, my body's more adapted to it, and it's kind of interesting, I guess, the way your body remembers, the way it adapts, and the way it functions like in that capacity.
Yeah, I heard something similar. I think this might have been on a business podcast, but it was more related to like work and like your to-do list, where basically, if you give yourself more tasks to complete in a day, the first day it's gonna be like hell. But then the second and third day, your mind kind of adapts to the amount of work that you have to do. So the first day that you work 12 hours, could be pretty strenuous. But then by the second and third day that you're working 12-hour days, you're like, okay, well, this is just what we do. Like we work 12-hour days and that's it. So yeah, that part's super fascinating. I need to do more research. I mean, if you stumble across something, let me know, because I'm equally fascinated by that. David, a couple of rapid fire questions here to round us out. I want to be respectful of your time, so we'll do a couple rapid fire. These are some of them are fun, but some of them may be a little more serious. So we'll see how this goes.
Yeah.
Um, being from Florida, I have to ask you, favorite pub sub?
Favorite pub sub, man. I gotta go with the chicken tendies.
That's a classic.
Yeah.
Do you get the buffalo sauce or no?
Uh, dude, I do on occasion, but I'm usually a no sauce guy.
Okay, I like it. I
Yeah.
respect it. When have you been the most proud of yourself?
Most proud of myself. Never. No, uh, honestly, man, I think going back to that first kind of like philanthropic situation that I did with the we were calling it the COVID 100, but that 100-mile run that I did to raise awareness for frontline medical workers and being able to raise money for that. I think that was just the complete package of everything that I really love to do.
Is there anything externally that keeps your motivation running high? Like,
Um,
is there an extrinsic factor? You talked a lot about your intrinsic and this natural, seemingly genetic, reason to compete and to keep pushing further. But I'm curious if there's anything extrinsic that pushes you.
extrinsically, I think it's just passion of other people. I think that's my favorite thing actually in the whole world. Is just I love when people are stoked about something. So honestly, like if somebody comes up to me, I love to be sold something. And if somebody's like, "Hey man, I got this next like crazy thing, we got to do it," even if it's something that I'm not really that into, I'm like, "Let's go, let's go do this thing." I'm so down. So that's probably my favorite thing. Is just like somebody being like stoked out of their mind, and really excited about going after a goal that they want to do.
Love it. Yeah. I I'm trying to think here. So obviously, being a Red Bull athlete, I'm always curious. Like, how does one become a Red Bull athlete?
Yeah, man. I mean, it was definitely a crazy process. I mean, I was participating in some of their events over the years, but then working a little like closely with them in some of their marketing endeavors within New York City before I actually became an athlete. So it was about I think a year and a half, 2 year journey of kind of like getting to know the brand, getting to know the ins and outs of the people that work there before actually like signing on as an athlete. And I think it's a mixture kind of everything. So I definitely still compete in some mainstream races, but also I feel like I wear a lot of different hats, and I think that's something no pun intended for Red Bull. But I think that's something that they really look for. It's like people doing kind of these crazy stunts, definitely competing at a high level, and also like kind of like pushing the envelope in a new way in their sport.
This is the last one here to round us out on the rapid fire. But in 2015, you were on the dean's list at UF. Was that route something that you considered more of the? And I think your degree was in agriculture and life sciences. Was that ever like a real possibility for you? You're just like, listen, I'm gonna do this cool thing, do really well, then hopefully land a gig somewhere, or kind of what was your mindset surrounding that?
Actually, man, or funny enough, I exactly what we were talking about before. I was always, I guess, like pretty like focused on school and wanted to do well in that department. But um, but during that time frame, I was leaving and moving back to Colorado. And so I actually like sped up my degree on the path that I was on. And so I took the most credits that I ever took during that last year or that year at Florida that I spent. And again, I think it was like something that I was like so in the zone because I was taking so many classes and working so hard at school that I feel like I was like fully directed at it. And again, it was like one of those things that I feel like uh, you kind of rise to the occasion. But it wasn't something I guess like that I was like fully like seeking out to do. It was just I kind of like wound up in the situation a little bit through my own my own antics, and I think it helped me rise to the occasion in a different way.
Love it. Well, David, before we let you go, we have a little tradition here on the podcast, and that tradition involves some life advice. And so at the end of every episode, I ask my guest to leave a piece of advice for the next guest. But the catch is that you do not know who the next guest is going to be. And so our last guest on the podcast was Dr. Jim Lair. Jim is a world-renowned tennis coach, really a mental performance coach. He's worked with numerous number one tennis players. He actually had a facility here in Orlando, the Johnson & Johnson Performance Institute. He's written, really kind of pioneered this idea of mental toughness, released a couple books in the 70s that really pushed the field and kind of opened up everyone's eyes to this, again, to this field of mental toughness and what that truly means. And so his advice for you was never surrender your spirit. There's always a solution. There's always a way to leverage what's happening to us to make us stronger and be an inspiration. And your life really isn't about you. It's about what you can do for others. And if you get that, everything's going to fall into place. So first of all, what does that advice mean to you? And then what is the advice you'd like to leave for our next guest?
I mean, that's incredibly spot on. I mean, shouts to the doctor. I mean, very, very well said. And definitely a similar ideology of how I love to live my life. And that's something I would mean kind of like also shouts I guess to younger me freshman year. I would like to I guess lean on that a little bit. And I would just say, continue to go out and do what's exciting you day in and day out. And I think the ripple effect that's going to have on the world is going to be something that you don't expect, but it's going to brighten the world every day. So yeah, go out and do what sets your soul on fire.
Fantastic. David, before we leave, where can people find you and when is your next race?
Man, people find me running around the road. So if you're out there and you see me run by, give me a shout. Let's catch some miles. And but other than that, on social and stuff, just my name, David Kilgore. Check me out on IG, YouTube, Facebook. Shoot me a message. We can catch up. And the next race I have coming up or I feel like the next big beacon is the Great World Race in November. So the 7 marathon, 7 days, 7 continents.
Love it. David, this has been amazing. The hour has flown by. I can't thank you enough for your time. I know you're a busy man over there in New York. You're probably going to go run 10 miles right after this. So we will let you go. David, it's been a pleasure. Thanks so much.
Man, Nick, it's been a great time. Thanks for having me on, man.
Absolutely.